the red, the small ribs in there, and then they have more of I don't know, just a regular kind of a potato that's about, like that. And then they have some garnish,
To see everybody here today, considering all the other things that you certainly could be doing out there, this is why we put up with that long, bitterly cold winter. It's just to get into weather like this. So, just so many things going on. How many people think we're not going to have another freeze? Boy, okay. Well, I certainly hope you're right. I have to admit to planting my first tomato plants this week. I haven't planted all of them yet, but this weather's just so beautiful. It is year when Easter's late, so all I'm going to say is if you can plant tender things out there, I would have a little bit of insulate handy just in case. I'm not 100% sure that we're out of the cold weather, but it sure is looking more like it every day, and it just keeps getting prettier and prettier. Topic today is roses. How many of y'all grow roses currently? How many of y'all are frustrated with your roses periodically because they have problems? There are a lot of things to talk about with roses. If you're going to grow roses well, you need to have the proper place to grow them. You need to choose not only the right varieties, but choose whether they're own root or whether they're grafted. We're going to talk a bit about that. And then I'll give you a few cultural hints. Basically, anybody with good sunlight should be able to grow absolutely beautiful roses. If you don't have good sunlight, you better get a chainsaw and do something about that, because it's going to be tough to grow roses without good bright light. There are some that will survive in less than full sunshine, but to truly do well with roses, the more sun the better. There's no such thing as too much sun for roses. They like a lot of sun to put on the number of flowers that you want, and also to stay free from the various diseases that will sometimes affect roses. Just a couple of things about roses as far as handling them. Roses have one of the most delicate root systems out there when it comes to drying out. When you're planting roses, when you're moving roses, when you're doing anything with rose bushes, be absolutely certain that you never ever let the root system dry out. If you're going to move a rose from one spot to another, dig the new hole first so that you can immediately take it out of the ground, put it right back in. If someone has offered you a rose bush that you can dig up and take somewhere else, take a pot with you and plant it in the pot, water it in, even if it's only going to be a 30-minute drive across town or something, because it's just real simple. If a rose's root system dries out, the plant's going to die. So you've got to be certain that you never, ever, ever allow the root system on a rose to get completely dry. Now, having said that, once you've got them in the ground, they've spread their roots so far, it's very unusual to have a rose die from the drought. Now, last year was just an awfully dry year, but I can tell you I've seen roses all around that didn't get a drop of water all summer that have done just fine. But it takes them a while to develop that kind of root system. But roses are extremely drought tolerant once they are established. One other thing about roses is they are not deer proof. They are not even deer resistant. I don't know how they manage it, but thorns and all, roses are one of the deer's favorite foods. So if you're in an area with deer, you're either going to have to build a high fence or you're going to have to use a lot of bobex to keep the roses away. The blasted deer like roses so well. We had a customer up in Kerrville for years, and she built a rose garden probably twice as big as this some in our area, put a high fence around it, planted a beautiful rose garden in there, and one night left the gate open. That's all it took. Deer will very definitely prune your roses and prune them severely. Okay, let's talk a bit about how roses are grown. I feel that the absolute best roses that you will plant anywhere are what we call own root roses. O-W-N. And that means they could also be called non-grafted roses, but I don't know, somehow own root sounds a little bit better. They're growing on their own root system, and these are the roses that are going to have for the most part, the fewest problems and certainly have the longest lifespan potential. When Greg Grant was our horticulturist here, he found a rose over on the south side of San Antonio, a variety called Ms. Dudley Cross, which is an interesting old-fashioned rose, that he figured was at least 100 years old. And so they can live a long, long time if they're growing on their own roots. If they are grafted, as a lot of newer roses are, it's kind of like, oh gosh, kind of like having bypass surgery. Eventually those bypasses are going to wear out. A graft point will eventually wear out. It is very unusual to have a grafted rose that lives more than 10 or 15 years. So your own root roses are going to be longer lived to begin with, but the problem is that when they come out with the newest and latest hybrids, they want to be able to produce the absolute maximum number of plants possible. And you can do that when you're grafting them a whole lot better than you can making it by cuttings. For every one rose cutting you plant, you probably could have converted that into 6 or 8 buds, which would mean 6 or 8 grafted roses. So your newer rose varieties always seem to come out as a grafted rose before we'll see them on their own roots. Some of them you may never see on their own roots. Some of you may have to go find a friend that has one of these growing, take some cuttings yourself, and start your own on your own roots. Now, when I was growing up, we were always told that, oh, they're grafted because they're too weak to grow on their own roots. My experience has been they do just fine on their own roots. I haven't found any rose out there that I really felt did better as a grafted rose. So I'm much, much more in favor of roses that are growing on their own roots. If you want to get the newest and latest hybrids, though, you probably will have to buy them grafted. And if you are buying grafted roses, it's very important that you buy roses that are grafted onto rootstock that will grow in this area. Now, what do I mean by that? You can take the same rose and you can graft it onto probably 10 or 12 different rootstocks, and different rose companies use different rootstocks. Some of these rootstocks are adapted to a sandy alkaline or sandy acidic type of soil. Other rootstocks are much better adapted to our more alkaline. The only way to really know, because very seldom do the roses ever say what they are grafted onto, but is to know who you're buying them from or know which company they came from. I mean, you know, the rose that I always like to use as an example, because it's one of the first roses I ever grew, was the Peace Rose, which is a beautiful big kind of yellow and pink rose, came out in 1945. And that rose has been grafted and grown on a whole lot of different kinds of rootstocks. But whenever you're looking at these roses, look at where they come from, first of all. Don't ever plant a Tyler rose in San Antonio. I have nothing against Tyler. I was born there quite a few years ago. But all the roses that you're going to see coming out of Tyler, coming out of Lindale, coming out of that area, those are all grafted onto a rootstock that loves that sandy alkaline or sandy acidic East Texas soil. The California growers, for the most part, use rootstocks that will do much, much better here than the Tyler rose growers do. So if you're buying from one of the big California companies, Weeks Roses is a good one, Jackson Perkins is a good one, Armstrong is usually a pretty good one. Those are all three fairly good companies, and they're going to probably have the roses on a rootstock that will do fairly well here. But still remember, if you can find a given rose on its own roots, it's going to last a lot longer and grow a lot better for you. Any questions about that? Everybody understand?
What would the label say?
The label's going to be a shiny tag that's not really going to have anything on it except the name of the grower and the name of the rose. So look for, if you're unsure, look for Weeks or Jackson Perkins or Armstrong.
But to tell if it's own stock or a grafted.
Normally, if it's a grafted rose, it's going to have a shiny metal tag on it. If it doesn't have a shiny metal tag, it's probably not grafted. Somewhere I've told you about that little book of gardening definitions we have. Their definition of a rose is a cluster of crisp brown stems covered with long thorns bearing one single shiny metal tag. Yeah, that's how you can always tell a grafted rose. But again, if you're going to have the latest and newest varieties, you're probably going to have to get a grafted rose. If I did, after been growing for a year, I probably, first thing I'd do is take some cuttings from it